Hey guys, it's Barrett with the Gimpy Camper. So today I want to talk to you about some tools that were sent out to me for an honest review. Just to throw that out there up front, I did not pay for these. I did pay for some of the connectors and such, but they were given to me for an honest review. So I'm just going to get that out of the way right now. Now, this is a company called Iwiss, has a subdivision called Icrimp. And I found that their tools are pretty high quality, and they sent them to me. And first I told them, I don't really think I need any tools, because truth be known, I have about everything tool wise. But then I learned what a Dutch connector was. Do you know what a Dutch connector is? Never even heard of it. So a Dutch connector is a weatherproof connector that you can put on with the tools that I'm going to go over today on a wiring connection that's weatherproof. It just clips in, clips out, similar to a lot of the ones that come on like automotive type stuff. Now a lot of those are called weather packs, which I also didn't know that you could do yourself, but that's a whole nother story. So everything's kind of turning in the automotive world towards Dutch connectors. Now, that being said, they are a little on the pricey side, the connectors and the tools. It's one of those things that's kind of newer. And so this stuff is kind of on the pricey side, especially the connectors coming in. I mean, is it something that you have to have? Then, if you're strapped and whatever, I would say no, because you can always just put a butt splice connector in a lot of these areas. But this is weatherproof, it's detachable, comes apart, and I recently did this makeover, and I was actually planning it out whenever I talked to them about these tools. And I do have to say I'm sorry, because it took me longer to get to this point than I thought. But I travel for work, and I work a week somewhere away from home, and then I come home for a week. Hopefully, sometimes here lately it's been less, and it's been kind of hectic with hurricanes and stuff. But I'm going to tell you that I did a complete makeover of my truck. Now, a lot of you saw this coming if you've watched some of my other like bedliner videos. I took my plain Jane white 2016 Ram all apart, and I painted it military green, and I painted it with bedliner, military green and black. And I put new wheels on there. I put a roof rack on there, and with the roof rack, I knew that I was going to have a lot of electrical stuff, and that's kind of what made me reach out to them and say, yeah, I think that I will try something if you want to send it to me. And so with my roof rack in particular, it has cutouts on the sides and around the back where you can have these lights mounted. And so what I ended up doing is I have 4 like off-road lights on the front of the roof rack. And truthfully, I did just go ahead and use the wiring harnesses that came with those lights, because those 4 lights pull about 40 amps, and I didn't want to take a chance on messing the wiring harness up there and messing something up, causing a fire. But I've got 2 rock lights on each side, which are also controlled independently. I have all this going through a aux beam 12 gang switch, which we'll go over in a future video. I'm just trying to get this video out now ahead of the truck makeover stuff to complete my obligations, because I'm sorry that it took me so long to get here. But essentially, I have 2 rock lights on each side. They turn on and off independently. And then I have a light bar in the back that turns on and off independently. I also have a camera. It's actually a Halo View RV camera on the back of the rack. Serves as a cargo camera, and that allows it to be a lot easier to like back the truck in and hook up the camper and stuff, because I also just switched to a Gen Y gooseneck conversion. So we'll see how that works out. Not really used that enough, but back to the point at hand. So with all of that electrical stuff on the roof rack, I knew that I was going to be handling a lot of different connections. And so I was like, I think that this would be a great option, because this would make all of those parts removable. The toolkit that I'm going to review today has multiple tools in it. It's got closed barrel crimpers for the Dutch connectors in 16, 20, and 12 gauge, and then it's got the crimpers for open barrel, and we'll go over the difference in closed barrel and open barrel in a minute. And it also has the release tools, so you can take these connections apart. And then I had bought a variety pack of the different connectors because they come in a variety of shapes and sizes. Most of the ones I bought are 16 gauge, which worked pretty well for everything that I needed. But you can get them in just a simple 2-wire plug for just a positive and a negative plug together. You can get like 3-wire plugs, 10-wire plugs. You can get some that even work through like a bulkhead connector type thing. The supply is pretty limitless there, but I will say that those connectors are a little bit on the pricey side. So let's go over the benefits of a Dutch connector. So the benefits are, it's an easy connection, it's weatherproof, it comes, you can unplug it, plug it back in, take your accessory off, whatever. You can even take the connector apart and reuse everything but the pin. You can reuse the plug. And with it being weatherproof, and they also come apart a lot easier than a lot of like the automotive connectors. You know what I'm talking about. If you ever worked on a car, you know, they got a release switch here and there and it's hard to push down. They seem to go together and apart very easily. Now it might change if they get, you know, a lot of road grime in them or something like that. But I will say that I've been pretty impressed with them so far. Now, with this project, I only ended up using the 2-wire connectors. I used quite a few of those. So I used one to make my own harness for each of the pair of rock lights on the sides. I used one to connect the light in the back because I only had to put the female connector on there because it actually had the male connector, I believe. I might have that backwards, but I don't think so. But their pigtail actually had a Dutch connector. And these Dutch connectors are starting to be more and more used in the automotive world. Even the big off-road lights that I have on the front, which are from Harbor Freight, they're kind of modeled after the Baja designs for 1/4 of the price. They're still a little pricey though. But they have the female connector that's a Dutch connector, and that's how you plug those in. So these Dutch connectors are, like I say, becoming more prominent. So we have that. We already talked about them being able to be taken off and reused if needed with the little connector tool. That's pretty simple too. It's just got like a little pick on one side, and you go through and you can hook the little locking tab and just pull the locking tab out. And then you use the other side, which is like a little flathead screwdriver, just to push the pin over, or the locking tab away from the pin, and then the pin will just come out of the plug. It's fairly simple. All right, so what are the downsides to the Dutch connectors? Well, you know, as we already talked about, it can be a little pricey to get into because you got to buy the tools. And I mean, you can buy the individual tool. You don't have to buy the whole combo kit. But I do like having the combo kit because it gives me the options for future projects if I want to use a different size or something like that. And then you have to buy the connectors. On top of buying the stuff, the only other negative that I can really find is that I did have quite a bit of a intimidation factor when it comes to using these connectors. And I've done quite a bit of wiring stuff. You know, you've seen videos of me doing wiring projects in the camper. And I mean, I'm not the smartest and greatest, and I'm not the best at it, but I've never had any issues thus far. I really need to find some wood to knock on. But I will say that, you know, just because there's so many parts to the connector with the pins and each side of the plug and the locking tabs, for me it was a little anxiety producing. I started off with 2 longer pieces, cut them in half, so that way I had 2 positives, 2 negatives, so 2 red wires, 2 black wires. And then I stripped the end of the wires off, and that way I could just use this for practice. So like I say, you can reuse the plug, but you're not going to be able to reuse the pin. So you are kind of sacrificing something, a couple of the pins on each side just for this process to learn it. But to me, that was better than kind of trying to start the process that I had no idea what I was doing, if that makes any sense at all. So let's go over the difference between the open barrel and closed barrel pins, because that's the pretty basic thing that you need to know when you start this. So the closed barrel, or it's like it says, it's closed barrel, so it makes a whole circle around the wire. So it's like a cylinder that the wire goes inside, and the crimper tool crimps that down around the wire. It's a solid connection. There's no better way to do it, in my opinion. The open barrel actually has like a couple of little forks on each side, so when you crimp those down, they just kind of pinch it in a couple of different spots there, which for most things is probably adequate, but it's not as good as the closed barrel, and so that's why I would recommend those. So what we ended up using was all the closed barrel connections. And so we get the crimper. It's actually easier to do if you take the pin and you put it inside the crimper first, and then you put the wire in to the pin and crimp it down. There's also a tension selector on the side. And so that way, if you use a wire that's a little bit smaller, you can adjust the crimp there to make it a little bit tighter. That way the pin will still work. I tried to use a 20 gauge wire once and I didn't have any luck because I didn't see the tension was over there. Once I changed that, then everything worked fine. Now you have to remember, if you use like a 22 gauge wire, I'm not sure how small of a wire you could put in that pin, but you have to remember that the current you put through it, you can't put the same amount of amps that you can use for a 16 gauge wire. Obviously, the pin will take it, but the wire won't, and then the wire will melt if you try to put too much current through. And whenever I say that I was doing a smaller wire, it was just to run the RV backup camera that I have set up as a cargo camera. Everything else I use 16 gauge wire on. All right, so the next step in the process here is to, like I say, we already stripped the ends of the wires, and you don't have to strip them very far either. And then the pins are a little bit kind of hard to get used to. The male pins go in the female plugs, and the female pins go in the male plugs, if that makes any sense. It sounds counterintuitive, but that's the way that it works. And also it can be a little bit confusing at first, but all those pins, they have like a green stripe on them, and that's the side of the barrel that you put the wire in. So like the female pins, when you first look at it and you're just kind of new and intimidated, it kind of looks like the wire could go in either side, but the wire actually goes in the side that's got the green stripe around it. All right, so now we have our crimper, we put the pin in, we put the wire in, we crimp it down. We go ahead and crimp all the pins on all 4 wires just to practice. So we got 2 male pins, 2 female pins. And then we take the plug, and when you look at the plug on the double plug, on the back of it, it's got an orange rubber block that's a seal around the wire. Now, when you're first looking at these things, you don't even know which end's the end that the wire goes in, which not. But it goes through that orange block. And so you just take the pins, push them one by one through the hole in that rubber seal, and you push them until you feel it click into place. And you do that with both of the wires in each plug. After you get those in there, then you go over to your connectors and you get the locking tabs. So on one side, it's just a really simple little triangle piece. You just push it right down in there. And on the other side, on the female plug, it's kind of buried down in there. And what these do is they actually put pressure against those locking pins. That way the pin won't come out. So unless you remove the locking pin. So what I had to do on those, and what I see a lot of people do, is use a small pair of needle nose pliers, and you hold the little locking tab there, and you just look at which side's going to block against the pins. I think it's the flat side, but you have to go back and look at it again. It only fits one way. And then you push that down into the hole there with the needle nose pliers and let it go, and then use the tip of the needle nose pliers just to push it all the way down. Once you do that, you need to verify that your positive and negative wires line up on each side of the plug. I did, whenever I put the lights on, I had one of them that was backwards. And so don't be like me, because the lights didn't work. I was like, why is the lights not working? And then I started looking at the plugs, and it's like red, red, black, black, red, black, black, red. I was like, that's not going to work too well. So no wonder the light didn't come on. But essentially, that's the whole process of the Dutch connector. And so you put one on each side, and you can have like your wiring harness that you made yourself, and it can be removable to Lord knows what combination of things that you want to do. Just make sure that the plug and the wire size is adequate for the amperage going through it. And of course, make sure you got a fuse circuit. All of the fuses and relays for all these products is built into the aux beam, so I didn't really have to worry about that as much. And I knew 16 gauge was plenty based on the wattage and the amps for all the things that I have running. Everything to do with that, I'm all comfortable. It's going to work fine. All right, so in closing, I will say that these connectors worked fine. The tools worked great. I didn't have any issues with them. The little removal tool is great because you can just pull those pins right out of the plug. So like the two that I had that I said I had crossed over, I didn't have to redo anything. All I had to do was pull the locking tab out and use the removal tool to just hook that and pull it out. And then the straight side to push the locking tab over away from the pin, and that way I could pull the wire out. So I just pulled the wires out, switched them, put them back in, put the locking tab back in, plugged it in, everything worked fine. So, you know, like I say, these tools work great. They come with a storage case, a hard shell case. Like I say, they just work great. So I don't have any complaints about them. They worked well for what I needed. If you're in the market for something like this, I definitely recommend checking out the Iwiss Icrimp tools because I think that they're wonderfully made. So until next time, it's Barrett with the Gimpy Camper. Thanks for stopping by.
Do not forget to hit that subscribe button.